Was the Brett Kavanaugh, or Kavanaugh, as it's said in America, story rolls on, and this time somebody wrote a Facebook post who works at CBS, and the news anchor there, Chris Long, has been suspended before resigning from his position after the veteran journalist took to Facebook to write a 400-word post defending Mr. Kavanaugh on September the 17th. Now, this was well before, obviously, he was confirmed to the Supreme Court, and subsequently the post has been deleted, like a lot of other things, including YouTube this week, which seems to have rattled a few cages. It's only YouTube, you know. Never mind. It was only off for a couple of hours. And Mr. Long of CBS says, I have absolutely no sympathy for the increasingly long list of well-known names who have fallen from grace because they thought with their little head and not with the big ones. And then he started off well, and then he started to take a turn. You are beyond dreaming if you think 17-year-old boys are not going to misbehave from time to time as they begin to attempt relationships with the opposite sex. That is just the way animals are made, he said. He also wrote, a few things are more serious as rape, and that Ford's accusation stinks of political manoeuvring. And he also added that if he were nominated for the Supreme Court, they might have to enlarge the Senate hearing room to accommodate all young women from the mid-late 60s who felt that they had tried to go a bit too far. Of course, the media jumped on that, and his comments and choice of words drew a lot of backlash from other commentators and journalists, and the post got deleted and he was fired. You see, you can't state your opinion here anymore, and that's the way things are going. It won't always be that way. And here's a subtle sign of change. Police in California and Oregon this week did a raid on Antifa members. These are, for those who are new, are not anti-fascists as portrayed, and they're a group of former miscreants paid to organise and generate violence by the clowns, be it Soros, be it the agency goons, you name it. That's who and what they are. Anyway, 20 were arrested this week, and 15 names and faces were published for the public viewing, which is quite a change. And this could well be a sign of a follow-up to Trump's tweet last week over paid protesters. So they're going after them as well. President Trump suggested that Defense Secretary James Mattis could be one of the next administration officials to depart his cabinet. In an interview this week, which was airing on 60 Minutes on Sunday, the president said that there are some people in his administration that he's not thrilled with. I would imagine so. And asked by correspondent Leslie Stahl if Mattis is going to be leaving, Mr. Trump replied, well, I don't know. He hasn't told me that. I have a very good relationship with him. I had lunch with him 2 days ago. And it could be that he is. I think he's a sort of a Democrat, if you want to know the truth. Now, Trump said of the retired Marine Corps general, but General Mattis is a good guy. We get along very well. He may leave. I mean, at some point everybody leaves. People leave in Washington. Well, that's partially correct. Mr. Trump dismissed reports of chaos in the White House as fake news, but said, I'm changing things around. So clearly he hasn't finished, and he is entitled to. I have people now on standby that will be phenomenal. There's your message. And he also said they will come into the administration and they will be phenomenal. Now, people will remember a cryptic post. I know some of you don't like it. Time will tell on this, but perhaps you now understand that cryptic post from a number of weeks ago of generals gathered in the Mattis, just like witch hunts at Black Masses. Time will tell. Donald Trump again. Been a busy man this week, which is a pity, as certain things could have, other things could have been done or accomplished, but there's that much going on. It's difficult. I don't think there's enough hours in the day or days in the week at the moment. But also in that interview, he said that the Saudis could be behind the disappearance of the missing journalist and Washington Post contributor Jamal Khashoggi, and if so, the US would inflict severe punishment. This was also a reference made in a show a couple of weeks ago. Watch Saudi, watch Israel, watch Yemen. Now, Trump said that the Saudis denied in every way you can imagine anything to do with Khashoggi's disappearance when his son-in-law Jared Kushner spoke with the Saudi Arabia Crown Prince. But Trump said the country may still be responsible and an investigation is ongoing. He said, could it be them? Yes. When asked what kind of punishments he may pursue if Saudi Arabia is found to be behind the disappearance, Trump wouldn't commit to sanctions or cutting sales of military equipment to Saudi from American companies. But he did go on to say, which is kind of disappointing in some aspects, why we need a manufacturing plant here. He said, I'll tell you what I don't want to do is I don't want to hurt jobs. I don't want to lose a big order like that with the Saudis. And he says there are other ways of punishing. Well, I'm sorry, but if they're going to commit acts like that, and it's not proven yet, should we really be trading with these companies in militaristic ways? Maybe not. Now, tens of thousands of people's financial futures have been thrown into question when they were denied public service loan forgiveness. Now, that particular program allows certain not-for-profit and government employees to have their federal student loans cancelled after 10 years of payments. Why are they any different to anybody else? Now, 1 in 4 American workers are in the public service and could in theory be eligible according to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. But last year, the Bureau reported that student loan services are failing to guide borrowers to the consumer protection, mostly by not informing them of what they need to do to qualify. And as a result, just 96 people out of nearly 30,000 who applied to be released from their debt have been approved. Now, last year was the first year people could qualify for forgiveness, since it requires 10 years of payments, and the program began in 2007, just when the financial meltdown took place. They pull out slush funds out of other places. We'll hear more about slush funds later. Now, what I can say on this is, thankfully, the Trust is still working on a plan for the student loans issue. Any further news, we will update you in this show. More bizarre nonsense this week of politicians claiming to be one thing and another. Like this is important, but this is the levels that these people are going to. Elizabeth Warren released a DNA test that proves strong evidence that she had Native American in her family tree dating back 6 to 10 generations. Ooh, who cares? You know, an unprecedented move by one of the top possible contenders for the 2020 Democratic nomination for president. Really, you have zero chance as a Democrat. Trust me on that. Zero. Warren, who now claims to be Native American blood, has been mocked by President Trump and other Republicans and provided the test results in an effort to defuse questions about her ancestry that have persisted for years. Now, she planned an elaborate rollout Monday of the results as she aimed for widespread attention, and the analysis of Warren's DNA was done by a Stanford University professor and an expert in the field. His work on tracking population migration via DNA analysis. I think it's about 1 in 1,000 portion of DNA. In the end, who knows, and who really cares, you know. After we had 8 years of a non-American, and hardly anyone questioned, although Trump did, it just beggars belief. The federal budget deficit has swelled to $779 billion this year alone, and this is according to the Treasury Department on Monday, which was driven in large part by a sharp decline in corporate tax revenues, according to the Portal People, after the Trump tax cuts took effect. There's far more nonsense of that deficit than the tax cuts. Trust me, it's been going on for many, many years. The deficit rose nearly 17% year over year, from $666 billion last year to $779 billion this year, and is now on pace to top $1 trillion a year before the next presidential election. According to the Portal People. According to us, that's BS and won't happen. You all know why from previous shows. We're just waiting for the go-ahead. Now, the deficit for the 2008 fiscal year, which ended on September the 30th, was the largest since 2012, when the economy and federal revenues were still recovering from the depths of the recession. Newsflash, we still are. It never ended. Administration officials attributed the deficit rise to greater federal spending, including the military and domestic spending increases that President Trump approved this year, and not the $1.5 trillion tax cut. That will be corrected. Mitch McConnell's been in the news this week, which is not going to please people. And he insisted that the change had nothing to do with a lack of revenue or increased spending. This is to do with the budget deficit also. And instead, he blamed due to entitlement and welfare programs costs. The debt, he said, was very disturbing and driven by the 3 big entitlement programs, as he called it. Someone needs to remind it it's not entitlement. He blamed Medicare, Social Security and Medicaid. Now, I don't know too much about Medicaid, but I'm certain that people pay into Medicare and Social Security so they get out some of what they get back. So how is that an entitlement? These politicians need to be educated badly. Now, there's been a bipartisan reluctance to tackle so-called entitlement changes because of the popularity of those programs. And hopefully at some point here they will get serious about this, and President Trump promised to leave Medicare untouched on the campaign trail, but Republican leaders like House Speaker Paul Ryan and Florida Senator Marco Rubio, no surprise, have long indicated their desire to cut entitlement programs to pay for their tax cuts. Perhaps we need to cut their lobbying funds. Big celebration in the US Army this week. Seems to be all American news this week. Well, we do tend to go around the world. But this is a triumph for this particular lady and for females in general. Lieutenant General Laura J. Richardson has succeeded in breaking through a glass ceiling in the US Army. And now she's set to break a new one. For the first time in US Army Forces Command history, a woman will be leading the largest command in the Army. Now, she will be representing 776,000 soldiers and also 96,000 civilians. But this may be a first for the Army, but for Richardson, she's had other firsts, as she's been with the US Army since 1986. And in 2012, she became the first female Deputy Commanding General for the 1st Cavalry Division, known as America's First Team. 2017, she became the second in command to General Robert B. Abrams, and she was named the first female Deputy Commanding General of FORSCOM in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Congrats to her. No, well, maybe I shouldn't. I'm just not. Maybe I'm too old, but I just don't see women fighting in armies as a good thing for society. I wouldn't ban it or suggest stopping it. I just don't think it represents the female role model too well. You know, it's all about caring and nurturing, not destroying. This is the balance that we've lost. But like I said, I congratulate her for doing that, but it doesn't sit or feel right to me. The UN is next. And quite frankly, a disturbing dossier. It won't disturb those in THI, we've covered it extensively. But a dossier that was being released by a former senior United Nations official reveals this week that the United Nations employees have carried out over 60,000 rapes in the last 10 years. 6,000 a year. What's more, the dossier estimates that the organisation currently employs at least 3,300 pedophiles. Now, in just 10 years under the guise of rendering aid, which is a misnomer, the United Nations has literally been raping and pillaging countries across the world, and the problem has gotten so out of hand that has prompted the former UN insider Andrew MacLeod to blow the whistle and hand over the evidence to Britain's Department for International Development. And that was given to the Secretary, Mr. Patel. Now, according to the report, the dossier reveals that on top of the 3,300 pedophiles working for the organisation, thousands more predatory sex abusers specifically target aid charity shops to get close to vulnerable women and children. Now, according to MacLeod, anyone who attempted to blow the whistle on the horrifyingly rampant abuse is silenced and or fired. And in his dossier, Professor MacLeod last night warned that the spiralling abuse scandal was on the same scale as the Catholic Church. Indeed. Now, whilst the report reveals there are 3,300 current employees who are active pedophiles on the UN payroll, Cloud estimates the real number to be far higher. And he said there are tens of thousands of aid workers around the world with pedophile tendencies. But if you wear a UNICEF t-shirt, nobody will ask what you're up to. You have the impunity to do whatever you want, and it is endemic across the aid industry across the world. The system is at fault and should have been stopped years ago. You can add Red Cross and some of the other charity organisations to that. They're all involved in it. That's what they're there for. Collect money off people and go and get up to heinous criminal acts. It really is beyond comprehension. The Catholic Church is bad enough. Like the professor said, it's equal to that. And this is beyond comprehension for most people, even in the awake community. That the sheer depth of it, it's staggering. Britain. We're off to Britain next. Hundreds of thousands of pensioners who are approaching state pension age will miss out on winter fuel payments this year because the goalposts are being moved. No surprise there, they always do that in the UK. But American listeners, pensioners get a fuel payment top up on their retirement or benefit. They keep altering the age and people keep missing out. That's what happens. So because the age you become eligible to receive up to £300, which is roughly $420 ballpark, discount off your energy bills has risen in line with increases to the age women get their state pension. Now, until April 2010, women reached state pension at 60, but this figure has been gradually rising, and this November it will reach 65 for both men and women. After this, it will rise in stages to age 68 between 2037 and 2039. I'll be amazed if it went that far. Bear in mind, most of those clowns will have been gone who make up this bullshit. So, now what this means for the winter fuel payments is that last tax year you'll need to be born on or after August the 5th, 1953 to qualify. This means you would have been aged at least 64 and 3 months when the benefit was typically paid out in November. A classic British politic tactic. Give in one hand and take more in the other. And there was a meme in the UK, because this has been going on for a long time, and a lot of the elderly are faced with a drastic choice during the winter. They either eat or they heat, and very few can do both. And this is a national scandal, and the people should do more about it, in my opinion. We'll all be elderly and pension age one day. You can't just ignore it because you're young. No, that's years away. And it's only the pensioners, they're just a nuisance. No, they're not. And any society that ignores children and pensioners is not particularly civilised, in my opinion. Mr. Trump and Britain again. Trump said he will kick-start. Read between the lines on this. Trade talks with Britain the moment Britain quits the EU. Brexit and all that nonsense. That was revealed yesterday, and America's top trade official announced plans for a cutting-edge deal with the UK to be struck as early as the spring. Mr. Lighthizer, the US trade rep, insisted the negotiations will begin shortly after Brexit allegedly takes place on March the 29th, because both sides have been preparing for talks since last year. Now, the plans emerged in a letter sent by Mr. Lighthizer to the leaders of the US Congress yesterday, and he wrote, "We intend to initiate negotiations with the United Kingdom as soon as it is ready and it exits from the European Union on March the 29th, 2019. Seems to be a lot of things getting pushed back to 2019, isn't it? Now, the United States and the United Kingdom are the first and fifth largest economies in the world, respectively, and maintain a broad and deep trade and investment relationship, which is rather shallow, one would suggest. A study this week, an actual valid one for once, but over the past few decades, America's tornadoes, known as Tornado Alley, has been shifting east. According to this new study, tornadoes have been shifting due to decreasing tornadoes in Oklahoma, Texas and Kansas, but spinning up more in states along the Mississippi River and farther east, it revealed. Scientists aren't particularly sure why. They never are. And tornado activity is increasing most in Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, Louisiana, Alabama, Kentucky, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa and parts of Ohio and also Michigan. So the tornado alley is shifting east. Maybe one day it'll go out into the ocean and not bother everyone. Message for the people who have Apple users are now being given, or Apple are allowing users to download any data the iPhone maker has collected on them and delete it. On Wednesday, they launched a dedicated privacy portal for US users that let them request a copy of all their data they have on them, correct any errors, and pause or delete their Apple account. Now, it follows the launch of a privacy portal, nice reference, for European users in May as part of Apple's compliance with the new General Data Protection Regulation rules. That's a mouthful. Which require firms to have a data portability tool, among other things, to protect users and their data. This also applies to customers in Canada, Australia and New Zealand. They can also take advantage of the portal. So users can see and search through all the data that they've collected, which many include things like photos, iCloud data, calendar entries, documents, App Store purchases and a history of repairs on your devices, along with other information. Really? Now, prior to the tool launching, users could request their data by contacting Apple directly, which they largely ignored. And after a user requests their data, they'll have to wait a few days for Apple to prepare the file. Indeed. One day that'll all go. Trust me on that. Work's underway on that. The Justice Department have charged a Treasury Department employee with giving a reporter confidential banking reports tied to Paul Manafort. Maria Butina and other suspects charged in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia's investigation. And federal prosecutors say Natalie Mayflower Sowers Edwards will appear in court Wednesday in Alexandria, Virginia. Edwards, who is 40, is a senior official at the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Names go on forever. She is accused of leaking the material to a journalist who was not named in the criminal complaint. Now, she had tried to conceal her relationship with the reporter on Tuesday and denied having any contact with the news media when FBI agents first interviewed her. Busy boys' time at the moment, the FBI people. According to court documents, that also reveals she's ultimately confessed, but they say Edwards claimed to be a whistleblower who sent the documents to a reporter for record keeping. Although she has previously filed a whistleblower complaint with the Treasury Department, agents determined that it was unrelated to the document leaks. I'm saying no more than that. US President Donald Trump, as this is the final news piece, has threatened to use military force to completely close the US-Mexico border. The warning via a series of tweets today comes as a new caravan of more than 3 and possibly as more as up to 4,000 migrants from El Salvador, Honduras and Guatemala heads north. Mr. Trump has already threatened to cut all aid payments to the 3 countries over illegal immigration, and the group says they are fleeing violence and poverty in the home country. In addition, Trump said to stop all payments to these countries, which seem to almost have no control of their population. I must, in the strongest of terms, ask Mexico to stop this onslaught, and if unable to do so, I will call up the US military and close the southern border. That has nothing to do with poverty and violence. There is a lot in Central and South America, some of it deliberately, well, most of it. This is to do with Obama and his Muslim Brotherhood gangs who are inside these caravans, ready to launch mayhem on US-American soil. So that's why the Trump threatened with the military. It's the same thing we reported many, many months ago.